The stars stretched out before them, endless and silent, as humanity drifted into the unknown. The great ships of the Galactic Council had turned their backs, sending humans into exile in the far reaches of space. They had been condemned for the smallest of offenses, a misunderstanding, a mistake made by a few, but the punishment was harsh exile. For centuries, humans had been a quiet species in the galaxy. They were not the strongest, nor the most advanced. The other species of the Galactic Council had often looked down upon them. The Council was made up of beings from countless worlds. The wise Vaunter from Gala IV, the fierce Xiphos warriors from Sarek, and the peaceful Lurians from Nebula 7. To them, humans were insignificant. Their technology and history, nothing. Compared to the ancient civilizations that had ruled the stars for millennia, the humans had tried to be a part of the grand galactic family, sending ambassadors, offering trade, and making their case for inclusion in the greater alliance of species. But time and time again, they were dismissed. They were deemed weak, unworthy, and their presence in the galaxy was little more than a curiosity. But then it happened. A mistake. A ship, a small human vessel, had been caught in a diplomatic incident. It had strayed too far into restricted space. A warning was issued, but the pilot, a young human named Ryan Holt, hadn't received it in time. The ship accidentally crossed into the borders of the Vaunter homeworld. The Vaunter's advanced technology had detected the intrusion and responded by sending a fleet to intercept. It wasn't the pilot's fault, but to the Council, it didn't matter. The Council held a hearing. The evidence was clear: humanity had violated the rules. Punishment? Exile. The decision was swift. The humans were to be cast out, sent far beyond the Council's jurisdiction, with no resources, no allies, and no hope. The Council's verdict was final. There would be no appeals. The humans had been abandoned. Ryan Holt stood in the Council chambers, surrounded by alien faces that showed no emotion. I'd never felt so small. The weight of the Council's judgment pressed down on him, but his heart burned with an unspoken resolve. He had come to the galaxy seeking peace and partnership, but now they were giving him something else, a chance to prove humanity's strength. As the fleet of human ships left the core worlds, they were escorted by the Council's ships, forced to the farthest corners of space. The darkness outside was infinite, and inside the ships, the humans whispered among themselves, sure of what their future held. "This isn't the end," said one of the crew members, a woman named Sarah, who had been part of the diplomatic team. "They may think we're weak, but we've only just begun." Her words echoed in the silence of the ship, a spark of defiance among the despair. Out here in the unknown regions of space, the humans found themselves with little more than their wits and their will to survive. But what they lacked in resources, they made up for in determination. The exile was meant to break them, to erase their presence from the galaxy's history. Instead, it became the catalyst for something greater. As days turned into weeks, the humans adjusted to their new reality. Their ships were not as advanced as the Council's, but they had one advantage: human ingenuity. The engineers worked day and night, modifying the ships and equipment. They found creative ways to adapt alien technologies, discovered in the wreckage of old battleships left behind in forgotten parts of space. They learned quickly, pushing the limits of what was thought possible. The isolation was difficult, but it gave them time to think, to plan, and most importantly, to unite. They were no longer divided by politics or petty quarrels. Now they were all that stood between themselves and the darkness of space. In their exile, they had become something stronger, a family bound by a common purpose. "We don't need the Council," said Ryan Holt as he looked out at the stars. The ships, once fragmented and disorganized, now operated in perfect harmony. The crew had come together, forging bonds that no Council could break. They had been cast away, but in that moment, they realized they were free. Free to build their future, free to decide their own fate. Months passed, and the humans grew stronger. They began to explore the surrounding regions of space, discovering new planets, new resources, and new technologies. Their journey had begun. with little more than a fleet of damaged ships and the will to survive. But now they were becoming something more, something important. It was on the edge of the galaxy, far from the eyes of the Council, that humanity discovered something that would change everything. A hidden planet, long abandoned by any known species, held secrets that no one could have imagined. Deep beneath its surface, ancient technologies, forgotten even by the most advanced species, waited to be unlocked. It was this discovery that marked the beginning of humanity's rise. What the Council had seen as a punishment, humanity turned into an opportunity. They would build, learn, and grow stronger. And soon the galaxy would know that exiling humanity had been the biggest mistake the Council ever made. The humans were no longer just survivors. They were a force to be reckoned with, and they would stop at nothing to prove it. The days of wandering through deep space had become weeks, and the weeks turned into months. Humanity was no longer the group of exiles they once were. What had begun as a desperate survival effort had grown into something far more powerful, a community. People determined to not just survive, but to thrive. Ryan Holt, once a simple pilot, now found himself the leader of a growing fleet. The survivors of humanity were beginning to rally behind him, a symbol of hope and determination. But more than that, they were starting to realize that their exile had brought with it something unexpected. Their situation, once seen as a punishment, was now giving them the chance to build something new, something no one in the galaxy had ever seen before. The first breakthrough came when they discovered the old abandoned planet deep in the uncharted region. The planet, covered in thick forests and rocky mountains, seemed unremarkable at first. But as the humans dug deeper, they uncovered something incredible. Hidden beneath the surface of the planet, there was an entire underground complex filled with technology, alien technology, to be exact. The walls of the complex shimmered with strange symbols. Machines that were unlike anything the humans had ever seen stood in silent rows. It was a treasure trove of lost knowledge, waiting to be unlocked. The humans worked together, poring over the systems, learning how to activate and adapt the advanced technology. At first, it was difficult. The systems were alien, their logic and design unlike anything the humans had ever encountered. Human ingenuity had always been the species' greatest strength. They were quick to learn, constantly improving and modifying the machines to suit their needs. The first major breakthrough came when the humans figured out how to repair and use the advanced energy sources. They had learned how to harness the power of the machines in ways the original creators had never intended. These new energy sources were far more efficient than anything humans had used before. With this new power, their ships could travel farther and faster than ever. It was a gift, one that would change the course of humanity's destiny. Now, we have a chance, Ryan Holt said as he watched the first newly powered ship rise from the planet's surface. Its engines humming with strength. The crew gathered around him, their faces filled with excitement and wonder. We can build, we can explore, and most importantly, we can fight back. With the newfound technology, the humans no longer had to rely on the old ships and weapons they had left with. They could now construct new vessels, stronger, faster, and better equipped. The weapons they developed were unlike anything the Council had ever seen. With weapons that could cut through armor like butter and shields that could withstand unimaginable pressure, the humans didn't just build ships. They began building cities. Not just any cities, but cities designed to harness the full power of the advanced technology they had uncovered. They learned how to create sustainable energy, harnessing the planet's resources in ways that no one had ever imagined. The cities grew quickly, each one becoming more advanced than the last. Soon, the humans had a small but thriving empire, built not on conquest, but on innovation. The more they learned, the more they realized that their exile was no accident, it was fate. The galaxy's greatest powers had underestimated them, casting them aside without knowing the potential they held. The humans had always been quick learners, but now, with these technologies, they were becoming something greater, something powerful. But the humans did not keep this newfound power to themselves. They knew what it was like to be discarded, to be forgotten, They reached out to the other exiled species, those who had also been oppressed by the Galactic Council. They showed them the power of cooperation, of unity. They offered knowledge, technology, and support to those who needed it. One of the first species they helped were the Uruk, a race of fierce but peaceful warriors who had been pushed to the fringes of the galaxy by the Council. Uruk had been living on a barren, frozen world with little hope of survival. But after the humans showed them how to harness the new energy sources, the Uruk were able to rebuild their cities, and with that, their confidence. They quickly joined the humans, grateful for the chance to fight back against the Council. It wasn't long before other species came forward, offering their allegiance to the humans. The Xiphos, once the proud warriors of Cyric, saw in the humans the strength they had once lost. The Lurians, with their deep wisdom, recognized the humans' potential as not just survivors, but leaders. The other races saw that the humans were building something far greater than just a fleet. They were building a future that could unite the galaxy. Ryan Holt watched it all unfold, his heart filled with pride. What had once been a group of exiles had now become the center of a new galaxy-spanning alliance. "We are more than survivors," he said, standing in front of the Council of Leaders. "We are a new hope for the galaxy. We have the power to change things, to reshape the galaxy in our image." The Galactic Council made a mistake. They thought they could erase us, but instead, they've given us the chance to create something no one could ever imagine. The human empire was no longer just an idea. It was real. And it was growing. As their power and influence spread, the humans faced new challenges. They would have to learn how to balance their growing strength with the responsibilities that came with it. But for the first time in centuries, the humans had a future that wasn't defined by the Council's judgment or their exile. It was a future they would build themselves. And with every new city, every new alliance, and every new victory, the humans proved that they were no longer the weak and insignificant species they had once been. They were a force to be reckoned with. The stars shone brightly in the sky above as humanity's small fleet of ships sailed through the darkness of space. It had been months since they had discovered the abandoned planet. Months since their survival had turned into something far greater than they ever imagined. The humans were no longer a scattered group of exiles. They were an empire in the making. Ryan Holt, once just a pilot, now stood as the leader of this growing human empire. Under his leadership, the humans had begun to unite the scattered species of the galaxy, all those who had been left behind or abandoned by the Galactic Council. These exiled species, once struggling to survive, were now finding strength in the humans' example. They had seen what humanity had achieved and were eager to join them. The first true test of humanity's newfound power came when a fleet of alien ships from the Council arrived in the outer reaches of the galaxy. They came with a simple message: return to your place or face the consequences. Ryan stood at the helm of the flagship, a massive ship that had once been a small cargo vessel, now refitted with the most advanced technology humanity had unlocked. He knew the Council would not let them rise without a fight, but he also knew they could not afford to back down. The future of their empire depended on it. "We didn't come here to retreat," Ryan said, standing before his crew. "We came here to build, to grow, and to make sure no one ever has to face the Council's cruelty again. If they want to fight, we'll give them one." His words were met with nods of determination from the crew. The humans had come far, and they would not let anyone take that away from them. The new fleet of ships, which now included many of their allies, was ready. The Uruk warriors had equipped their own ships with advanced weapons, and the Lurians had shared their wisdom on defensive strategies. Together, they were a force that the Council had never seen before. The humans had learned the art of warfare, not by fighting for dominance, but by defending what they had built. Their ships were powerful, faster, and more advanced than anything the Council had, thanks to their combination of alien technology and human ingenuity. The weapons were precise, the shields unbreakable, and the crew more united than any fleet the galaxy had ever seen. As the first battle began, Ryan watched the enemy fleet approach. They were organized, a large group of ships, but they were not prepared for the humans' new tactics. The humans had been exiled, yes, but in that exile they had learned to adapt, to think differently. Their ships weaved through the enemy's attacks with ease. Their weapons fired with deadly accuracy. It was not a battle for survival. It was a battle for their place in the galaxy. The human fleet's maneuverability caught the Council off guard. For the first time, they realized that humanity had become something more than just an afterthought. They had become a power, a new force rising from the ashes of exile. The battle raged on for hours, and in the end, the Council's ships were forced to retreat. They had underestimated the humans, and it had cost them. "That's how we do things now," Ryan said, his voice calm but full of pride as he stood on the bridge of the flagship. "We don't back down. We move forward." The victory was a turning point. The humans, once cast out by the Council, had now proven their strength. The galaxy had taken notice. Their empire, once just a dream, was now a reality. But victory brought its own challenges. The Galactic Council had been defeated in one battle, but that did not mean they were finished. The Council had allies, and those allies would not let humanity's rise go unchallenged. In the days that followed, messages came from across the galaxy. Some species were eager to join the humans, seeing them as the future. Others, fearful of the power the humans had gained, warned them to stay out of their way. The humans found themselves in the midst of a growing political landscape, one that was changing faster than they could keep up. Ryan understood the importance of these decisions. They could no longer afford to be outsiders. The human empire was no longer just a group of survivors. It was a new power in the galaxy, and it needed to be respected. "We need to expand," Ryan said to the Council of Leaders. "We need to show the galaxy that we are here to stay. We also need to make sure we don't repeat the mistakes of the past. We need allies, and we need to build trust." The humans began to forge alliances with other species. They offered technology, protection, and shared resources in exchange for loyalty. The exiled species, once abandoned, now had a chance to prosper under humanity's leadership. The Eric, the Xiphos, and the Lurians all pledged their allegiance to the human empire, and slowly, other species began to follow suit. The humans did not force these alliances. They were built on mutual respect and shared goals. The empire they were building was not one based on fear or control, but on unity and cooperation. Together, they were stronger than any single species alone. They were building something that could challenge the power of the Galactic Council, something that would last for generations. As Ryan looked out at the stars, he knew that their journey was far from over. The Council would not give up easily, and there were still countless challenges ahead. But for the first time, humanity had the power to shape its own destiny. They had proven that even in exile they could rise. And now they had allies, friends, who would stand by them as they built an empire that would change the galaxy forever. After their first major victory, the humans believed that the worst was behind them. They had proven their strength, built alliances, and established their presence in the galaxy. The victory over the Galactic Council's fleet was more than just a battle won. It was a message to the galaxy that humanity was no longer the weak, exiled species they once were. They were a new power, one to be reckoned with. However, the Galactic Council was not one to be easily defeated. Despite their loss in battle, they had not forgotten the humans. The Council had deep roots in the galaxy, and its influence stretched far and wide. Humans' rise posed a direct threat to their authority, and they would not allow a species once considered insignificant to challenge their rule. In the months following the battle, the Council took action. They called upon their allium of the most powerful and feared species in the galaxy and formed a united front against humanity. The Zorith, a warlike species known for their devastating weapons, and the Therid, a race of cunning spies, were just two of the many who agreed to join the Council's cause. Together, they sent a clear message to the humans. The time for rebellion was over. Ryan Holt knew that the humans could not afford to sit back and wait. The time had come for them to make a stand. They had gained strength, but now they had to prove that they could defend their empire and protect what they had built. They had no choice but to prepare for another war. As the threat of the Council's combined forces loomed over them, the humans began to gather their allies. The Uruk warriors, the Lurians, and the Xiphos had all pledged their loyalty to humanity's cause, but they knew that even with these allies, they were outnumbered. It was time to take their fight to the next level. "We are not just defending ourselves," Ryan said to his council of leaders. "We are defending the future of every species that believes in freedom, cooperation, and hope. This is not just about us. It's about everyone who has been oppressed by the council." With those words, the humans and their allies began to prepare for war. The weapons they had developed since their exile were now stronger than ever. The human fleet had grown, and now they had even more advanced ships. The ships were faster, more powerful, more capable of holding their own against the greatest fleets in the galaxy. But it wasn't just their ships and weapons that made them a formidable force. It was their tactics. The humans had learned from their past mistakes. They were no longer just survivors. They were fighters. Their strategy was different from anything the Council had ever seen. They used their knowledge of the galaxy's terrain, their ability to adapt, and their creativity to gain the upper hand. The human ships were not just armed with weapons. They were equipped with advanced technology that allowed them to outsmart and outmaneuver their enemies. Their ships could cloak, making them nearly invisible to the enemy. They could send out decoys, creating confusion in the enemy ranks. And they had perfected their use of electromagnetic pulses, disabling enemy ships with pinpoint accuracy. The first strike came when a massive council fleet arrived at the edge of human-controlled space. The fleet was large, much larger than any they had faced before. It was made up of the most powerful ships in the galaxy, ships that could tear apart anything in their path. Ryan knew this would be the battle that would decide their fate. The humans and their allies prepared for the worst. The Uruk warriors were ready to fight with their unmatched strength and loyalty. The Lurians used their wisdom to help coordinate the fleet's movements. And the Xiphos provided tactical advice that made the humans' fleet even more unpredictable. Ryan stood on the bridge of the flagship, watching the enemy fleet approach. His heart raced, but he knew that they had the power to win. It wasn't just about their weapons. It was about their unity, their resolve. They had come together, not just to fight, but to protect the future they had built. "This is it," Ryan said, his voice steady. "Hold the line, and don't give up. For our people, for the galaxy." The battle began with a roar. The first volley of enemy fire lit up the dark expanse of space, but the human ships were already in motion. They were quick, darting in and out of the enemy's firing range, their advanced cloaking devices making it difficult for the Council's ships to track them. The humans' attacks were fast and precise, hitting enemy ships in their weak spots, disabling them before they had a chance to retaliate. But the Council wasn't backing down. The Zorith and the Therid proved to be a dangerous combination. Their ships equipped with weapons capable of overwhelming the human fleet. Despite the human speed and tactics, they were forced into a corner. The enemy had them outnumbered, and their strength was beginning to show. Ryan's mind raced. They couldn't keep this up forever. The humans needed a new plan, something to turn the tide of battle in their favor. Then it came to him an idea, one that could be risky, but one that could save them. He quickly relayed the orders to his fleet. The humans would use a feint, drawing the enemy into a trap. They would pretend to retreat, luring the Council's fleet into a narrow asteroid field where the humans could use the terrain to their advantage. It was dangerous, but it was the only way. As the human ships pulled back, the Council took the bait. They followed, eager to finish the fight. But as they entered the asteroid field, the humans launched their final attack. The cloaked ships emerged from the shadows, firing their electromagnetic pulses, disabling the enemy's shields and weapons. The enemy fleet was caught off guard, their ships falling one by one. In the chaos, the humans struck. Ow! Their ships moved in and out of the asteroid field, using the terrain to protect themselves while picking off the enemy fleet piece by piece. The humans' clever tactics, their willingness to risk everything, turned the tide of the battle. By the end of the day, the Council's fleet was shattered. The humans had won again. Ryan stood on the bridge, staring out at the remains of the enemy fleet. His heart was heavy with the weight of the battle, but he knew that this victory would change everything. The humans had proven once again that they were not to be underestimated. They had faced the full might of the Council and come out victorious. "We've won," Ryan said quietly, though he knew the war was far from over. The Council would be back, and they would have to be ready. But for now, the humans had achieved something no one thought possible. They had struck back, and they had shown the galaxy that they were not just survivors, they were conquerors. And their empire was unstoppable. Asterisk. The humans had won their battle, but the war was far from over. The Galactic Council, shaken but not broken, was still a powerful force. Their defeat at the hands of the humans had been humiliating, and they could not afford to let it go unanswered. Across the galaxy, the Council began to rally their remaining allies, preparing for a final push to crush humanity and its growing empire. The humans, however, were no longer the exiles they had once been. They had learned from each battle, growing stronger, more united, and more determined. Ryan Holt stood before the Council of Human Leaders, his face grave but resolute. The Council will not stop. They will try again, but we have to be ready. We cannot let them take back the ground we've fought so hard for. His words were met with silence, but no one disagreed. The humans knew what was at stake. They'd built something great, a new empire, one born from nothing but the will to survive. But they also knew that their strength alone would not be enough to defeat the Council. The galaxy was vast, and they needed more than just weapons and technology. They needed to inspire others to join their cause. Ryan's thoughts turned to the galaxy's forgotten races, ones who had suffered under the Council's rule, the ones who had been ignored or pushed aside. The humans had already formed alliances with the Uruk, the Xiphos, and the Lurians. But there were many more species that needed to be brought into the fold. It was time to unite the galaxy in a way that had never been done before. "Let's bring them together," Ryan said, his voice full of conviction. "Let's show the galaxy what we can do when we fight for each other, not for power. We are stronger together than apart." And so, the humans began their campaign not just of war, but of diplomacy. They sent emissaries to the farthest corners of the galaxy, offering alliances, technology, and protection in exchange for loyalty and trust. They made it clear that the human empire was not about domination. It was about freedom and cooperation. Slowly, more and more species answered the call. The abandoned races, the oppressed, those who had suffered for too long, humanity gave them hope. But not everyone was willing to join. Some species were too afraid to defy the Council. Others, like the Zorath, remained loyal to the Galactic Council, hoping for an eventual return to their old way of life. The humans knew they could not force anyone to join them. All they could do was prove through their actions that their empire was the future. And so, they continued to fight, not just with weapons, but with their values. The turning point came when the humans received word that the Galactic Council was preparing a massive fleet. This time, it would be their final attempt to crush humanity. Once and for all, the humans had grown stronger, but so had their enemies. Ryan gathered his closest allies for a final strategy meeting. The odds were stacked against them, but they knew they could not give up now. "This is it," Ryan said as he stood before his allies. "This is our last chance. If we win, the galaxy will never be the same. If we lose, everything we've built will be gone." The room was quiet, the weight of the moment heavy on everyone's shoulders. But no one hesitated. The humans were ready to face whatever came their way. They had built something stronger than just ships and weapons. They had built hope. The battle began with a massive attack on the outer defenses of human space. The Council's fleet was overwhelming, its ships more powerful than any the humans had faced before. But the humans had learned from every previous fight. They were prepared. Their ships, now equipped with the latest alien technology and their own innovations, moved with precision and speed. The humans didn't engage in a direct confrontation. They fought with strategy, drawing the Council's fleet into narrow channels and using the terrain to their advantage. The battle raged for hours. and for a time, it seemed as though the humans would be overrun. The Council's fleet was relentless, and the human ships were taking damage. But then, something shifted. The reinforcements the humans had called forth, newly united galaxy arrived. The Uruk warriors, the Xiphos fighters, and the Lurians all came together, joining forces with the humans to strike back at the Council's fleet. They weren't just allies anymore. They were one united force. The combined power of the human fleet and their allies caught the Council off guard. The humans' clever tactics, combined with the strength of their allies, were too much for the Council to handle. One by one, the enemy ships were disabled. Their commanders, unsure of how to deal with the unexpected onslaught the humans had, turned the tide of the battle, but it wasn't just because of their weapons. It was because they had united an entire galaxy against their oppressors. As the battle drew to a close, the Council's fleet began to retreat. For the first time in centuries, humanity had truly defeated the greatest power in the galaxy. The humans had won not just a battle, but a war. They had proven that they were more than just exiles. They were the future of the galaxy. Ryan stood on the bridge of his ship, looking out at the remnants of the battle. His heart was heavy with the cost of the fight, but he knew that this victory had changed everything. The Council had been defeated, but more than that, humanity had created something new. They had built an empire that was based on unity, freedom, and the belief that every species deserved a chance to thrive. "We did it," Ryan said, a sense of pride in his voice. "We've built something the galaxy has never seen before. This is just the beginning." In the months that followed, the humans took their place as the leaders of a new galaxy. They didn't rule through fear, they ruled through cooperation and respect. They worked together with their allies to rebuild, to share knowledge, and to create a future where all species could prosper. The Galactic Council, now a shadow of its former self, was no longer the power it once was. Humanity had replaced it, not with war, but with the strength of unity and purpose. The galaxy had entered a new era, one where the humans were no longer the exiles, but the leaders. They had created an empire beyond imagination, built not on conquest, but on the belief that together they could achieve anything. As Ryan looked out at the stars, he knew that their work was far from done. There were still challenges ahead, and there would always be new threats to face. But for the first time, humanity had the power to shape its own destiny, and the galaxy would never forget the humans who rose from exile to become the greatest power in the stars.